What does it mean to you to be a woman in 2020?
I think that being a woman in 2020 is really complicated. I think that we're kind of at this intersection of a time of a lot of social change and social progression, but at the same time, living as a woman in 2020 can still be really stressful sometimes. So I think that it's encouraging to see how much growth that women have made. To think of all the privileges I have that weren't extended to my grandma and even my mom sometimes. I feel really lucky, but I also feel like there is still a lot of growth that needs to be had for women in society. And I think that that includes all women, not women that just look like me. And making sure everyone gets included in that progression.
Being a woman in 2020, like with everything that's going on, is especially interesting because I feel like we got served with an extra dose of like empathy and compassion. And I think to be constantly living in a state where you're like worried about yourself and others has really been exhausting.
In 2020, I have learned so much about myself, especially just like turning 22. I've learned to be self-confident and self-reliant. With a lot of things going on in the world, it kind of just makes me feel like I need to be independent. It makes me want to like educate myself on certain topics and things that will make me a better human being in general.
I think being a woman in 2020 has been very empowering. I know growing up in Tennessee and kind of having this whole idea of a role of a woman being more in the home and like taking care of children, that was always kind of my view. But now that I'm like older and I see that there's just so many more opportunities for women. And
I think it means to be powerful, to be confident. I feel like, not to bring Trump into this so quickly, but to have a president like Trump and kind of force women to kind of stand together and unite. In so many ways, Trump has polarized like all of the US, but I feel like, and I don't want to generalize, but for a lot of women, like we have come together and like we've been like, oh, like we're powerful, like we have a voice.
I think being a woman in 2020 means being more vocal about what you want and what you deserve.
As a young woman, how do you think media has affected you?
I know when I was younger, I read all the magazines like Tiger Beat and everything, and always saw these women with a lot of unrealistic body standards and beauty standards. And growing up, I always had this image of I wanted to be fabulous. I wanted to be like the girls in the media, in the movies and everything. So I know that definitely made me struggle as I grew up. And now I still work with it every day to learn that, hey, I don't need to look like this model on the cover of this magazine. Like, it's unrealistic. And I think it really did give me some esteem issues that I still work through to this day.
I think if you had asked me when I was 15, my answer would be really different from what it is now. But I think when I was younger, you know, we were the first generation to really grow up in social media, and like the generation now glowed up and then they got to social media. We glowed up through social media, and so is, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the even worse hair days. And I think that it was interesting to be a part of the rise of social media, specifically Instagram, because when I joined, it was like a bunch of, you know, teenage kids hanging out in the suburbs, like shooting these crazy cinematic photos. And I think like the rise of influencer culture came at a time where I felt much more comfortable in my body. I think like while I was going through a lot of changes in high school and I was like really uncomfortable in my body image, it would have been very detrimental to have like the social media that we have now. But now as I've like gotten more comfortable with myself and grown into, you know, just like being just like a lot more like self-love than I have been.
I feel like media affected you by just seeing the similar trope in every piece of media, basically, about like the women and like their places in the home and that kind of thing.
Anyways, women are just always getting saved. It's the whole princess and the prince trope, like, and I feel like I still think that I need to get saved in such a weird, like, convoluted way. Like, I still love it, like it when my boyfriend, like, helps me and saves me, and I don't enjoy that.
I think that media has affected me pretty profoundly and in a lot of different ways. I think that growing up, we were kind of this first generation that had digital media almost all the time growing up. So I think that that really shaped my perceptions of the people around me, and made it kind of easier to put people into categories based off of what I saw in the media and what I saw in real life. And I think that it made it really easy for me to try to put myself into a category of what girls in TV and movies looked like me, what were they like. And I think that it kind of gave me a black and white version of the world. I think that it just kind of complicated things, but also I think that it kind of opened me up to a lot of new ideas and new perspectives, which I think is really cool, but it took a lot of time to kind of find those. I think that things were kind of more negative when I was younger surrounding media, so I think that that has kind of pushed me to be more averse to it now, but I'm getting more and more comfortable with it.
Specifically in film and TV, how do you think the male gaze has affected you?
To be honest with you, I genuinely have not realized what the male gaze was until you explained it to me, and once you said the long shots on breasts or butts, it does, once you brought it up to me, it's something that I did start to realize that's not right. Women are being sexualized, and it's they don't need to be. Why is it a one standard thing, you know?
I think that it's kind of created a perception of what it means to be a woman and what it looks like to be a woman, but not coming from the woman's perspective. So I think it kind of devalues the unifying human experience we do have as women. And I think that it just further perpetuates the stereotypes that we already have. And I think that it really affects women's body image because it's really puts all the emphasis and value on her body.
I think it affected me by, from a young age, thinking that's what everybody wants from you and that's how your life is gonna be, but it's not. It's just from a very specific point of view.
I think in film and TV, women are really sexualized, and growing up since I was young, you always see that in the media. I feel a big thing is you see this double standard a lot, and I think that has affected me because media is a big part of all of our lives, and so are films and movies. So the way that these women were portrayed as I got older, definitely affected how I viewed myself growing up and how I viewed how I would be when I got older.
Has there been any film or TV shows that has profoundly influenced you as a woman?
Yeah, so it's gonna sound weird, but Silicon Valley, it's kind of a satirical take on the tech industry, which is the industry that I work in. But I think what was most pivotal for me was in the show, there's two venture capitalists that happen to be women, and I didn't realize that women could be venture capitalists. When I first got into the industry, I thought it was just a bunch of old dudes smoking cigars in a mahogany library in their leather club chairs. But I think that show showed me that while sexism is still very rampant in the industry, we're making a lot of changes in the way the capital is deployed, and I think having representation of venture capitalists being women in a mainstream show like that, where they had character development, it wasn't, there were venture capitalists that were women, they weren't women and then they happened to be venture capitalists. And it just made me be oh, that's a career that I could have. So I think in a big way it affected my career goals, and that's what I want to do long term.
a TV show that I really appreciated was Glow, and it's on Netflix. And it's about like female wrestlers, and it's kind of like not a reenactment, but it's just like based on a true story of these female wrestlers in I think the 70s. And I really relate to that because they're these women who are breaking through this like industry that is so male dominated. And I enjoy that they're physical and that they embrace their femininity in wrestling. They're performers, and I grew up dancing, and so like I really like relate to like the physical aspect of it and of being a woman and breaking through this like industry that is so male dominated.
I think one big film that just came out recently that really, I wouldn't per se hit home, but I could feel like I could relate to was the movie Athlete A, about all of the gymnasts that came out about sexual assault allegations and abuse allegations. And growing up in the cheer world, even though I didn't directly experience that and didn't really know anyone who did, I can see how the sexualization of younger girl athletes in our cheer uniforms, showing our bellies with the dancing, I could see how that could be running rampant behind the scenes. And so watching that and seeing these girls' stories, I was very thankful that that didn't happen specifically to me, but it does show us that we need to work towards a change and protect these young girls that get in these intense sports.
Yes, in middle school, back when Netflix used to like rent out DVDs to you and send them to your house, I got a movie called Misrepresentation, and it was basically about women in media and how they're portrayed and how it really negatively affects women's body image and self-worth. And I think to watch that film at such a young age, it really made me look at how I looked at media and how my body image was profoundly changed by women who, like, with male gaze were put in a perspective and a male's point of view, which we were all taught to think that tall, skinny, white women were like the pinnacle of beauty, when in fact that is so not true. But that's the stereotypes, that was the media's perception of things, and I think at the end of the day, perception is reality, but I think we all kind of have to work on learning that there's different perspectives, and learning that those perspectives can also change over time, and that can be a really beautiful thing. But I think it's very complicated.